We did. Look how conforming
Look at
we are.
that.
Look how conforming we are. Wow.
I'm the right order compared to my notes.
I was hoping that.
Amazing, just different policy.
I know.
Automated.
Yeah.
Our SQL is automated.
Yes.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Robotic Process Automation, Understanding the Opportunities and Challenges. So, my name is Dustin Strydom. I'm the Director of Automation Services at OpenBox Software. OpenBox is a real estate-focused IT consultancy. We have over 16 years of experience in finding a better way to provide, to solve business solutions or business problems for commercial real estate clients through the use of technology. Our real estate automation engine, which leverages robotic process automation or RPA, delivers process automation solutions to clients through a robots as a service or managed services model, and has positioned OpenBox as a global leader in robotic process automation services for the commercial real estate industry. So I just want to mention that this track is sponsored by Capgemini and DocuSign, and we'd very much like to thank them for their support and encourage you to visit them, their booths in the exhibitor hall. And I'd also like to thank the 2018 conference platinum sponsors, Yardi, Altus Group, CBRE, JLL, and MRI Software. So we have an amazing set of panelists today, all of whom have had different experiences in rolling out robotic process automation solutions within their own organizations. And we're going to have a great time unpacking that and discussing some of the practical uses of the technology and some of the lessons learned and those sort of things today, which is fantastic. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce them now. To my immediate left, we have Dhinaker, Vice President of Altus Platform at Altus Group. So Dhinaker leads the Altus Platform strategy at Altus Group with a core focus in expanding the web services integration capabilities of the Altus suite of solutions. Dhinaker has more than a decade of experience delivering, managing, and evolving SaaS-based software offerings, including the Altus on-demand platform. And to his left, we have Ilene Goldfine, Vice President of Business Technology Group at Hines. Ms. Goldfine joined Hines following several years of public accounting at Deloitte and Touche, primarily serving middle market clients. She's now directly responsible for new business technology initiatives throughout the company after her varied career at Hines within the accounting and investment management groups. To Ilene's left is Dean Hook. Dean is the Senior Vice President of Information Technology and Property Management for REIT. So REIT owns and manages over 8.5 million square feet and development of over 2.5 million square feet of office-focused real estate. Mr. Hook has over 25 years of experience in connecting real estate, business operations, and technology. Dean has spent his entire career either working internally or consulting with all types of real estate companies focusing on integrating business process and technology. He was extended the opportunity to lead the property management organization at REIT based on TIER's leadership group's recognitions that technology and process were core tenets of a successful property management organization. To his left is Chris Spaulding. So Chris joined Granite in 2006 and is responsible for directing Granite financial systems, operating systems, and business improvement systems. Chris also manages the help desk, network support, and building systems teams. Prior to joining Granite, Chris worked in consulting, providing commercial real estate companies technology and business improvement services. And then finally, we have Lauren Stokes. Lauren is the Director of RealFoundations and leads the technology services practice, which provides application, end-user, and infrastructure support services to real estate companies. She has over 15 years of experience providing management, consulting, and technology advisory services to the real estate industry. So welcome, everyone. So, firstly, what is RPA? I think the best way to get this started is for me to stop talking and play you a little explainer video, and hopefully that will get the concept across before we dive into the detail of it. So, let's just navigate through the technical aspect of this, and hopefully all plays successfully.
In a digital economy, there's a disruptive trend going on in the way work gets done. In the past, organizations offshore high-volume back-office production and IT operations to take advantage of cheap foreign labor. Today, not so much. Labor costs have trended up, and software-powered digital labor is now cheaper, faster, and more productive than old school labor arbitrage ever was. Meanwhile, the total contract value for outsourced and managed services has declined from $138 billion in 2007 to just $62.7 billion in 2017. And the 25 to 40% cost savings of robotic process automation, it beats the pants off the 5 to 10% cost save of traditional outsourcing business models. The most successful companies are pivoting from people to software for high volume, highly transactional manual processes, and this pivot is happening fast. So why is the pivot to digital labor so important? Because traditional approaches to labor cost savings and compliance are becoming less and less relevant each day. For example, in the banking and financial services industry, compliance costs will more than double over the next 5 years. But here's the good news. If you're in a highly regulated industry, the speed, accuracy, and analytics of RPA will drive down compliance costs and mitigate risk. The beauty of RPA is that it fully tracks and documents each step in an IT or business process. There's no compliance utopia for companies in highly regulated industries like banking, healthcare, and insurance. But the workflow, telemetry, and audit trails provided by RPA make it easier than ever to comply with industry and audit regulations. On top of that, software robots work 24/7, 365. They don't call in sick or take vacations, and they minimize processing errors. On the flip side, RPA boosts employee productivity. As software robots increasingly handle rule-based, repetitive, and dangerous work, it frees up employees to do more value-added activities that drive customer loyalty and long-term customer value. You can always find skeptics to downplay RPA as a passing trend, but RPA is fast becoming a critical success factor for organizations that want to compete and win in the digital economy.
Excellent. So hopefully that got the concept across at a basic level, and we can dive into a more conversational aspect to the topic, which would be good. So first of all, I'd like to start off with something that Altus Group actually released very recently, and Dhinaker will hopefully be able to comment on this a little bit more. But Altus Group released a report called the CRE Innovation Report. Is that right, Dhinaker?
Yeah, that's right.
And essentially the CRE Innovation Report surveyed, I think, over 400 leaders in the CRE industry, and really asked their opinions on game-changing technology and how that's going to affect the real estate industry. And a couple of key things that came out of that, really. The first one being particular focus on process automation. So, Dhinaker, wanted you to maybe kind of unpack it. We've got a slide up here which kind of mentions what some of these leaders thought about technologies like AI, big data, and blockchain, and then what they thought about automation as well.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, Dustin, the annual CRE Innovation Report that we put out surveys about 400 global CEOs and C-level and senior executives in the CRE industry to understand the technology trends that are happening. And out of this survey, there's one of the questions we asked was, what is the next big thing that we think is the biggest disruption to the CRE industry? And 50% of the audience, or 50% of the respondents, mentioned that automation could be very huge for the CRE industry, right? And they think of it as a major disruption force. We're thinking about, as part of that survey, they said 61% said debt underwriting could be, for especially established real estate assets or stable real estate assets, could be automated completely by bots, right? Or capital market brokerage could be automated by taking out and reducing the manual processes and tasks that happen. And part of that also was appraisal and valuations is also another big thing that they identified as processes. So I think at a high level, we understand that in the CRE space, there's a lot of manual steps and processes and a lot of people involved doing repetitive tasks to help achieve the outcome. And I think what everybody recognizes is that by automating it, we have a huge opportunity for changing the resource allocation and helping us add better value to our customers, right? And there's new value that we can realize by taking these CRE professionals to do much more strategic activities as opposed to the tactical processes of putting it together an outcome.
Absolutely. And so there was another stat regarding integration, which I thought was quite interesting, that came out of the report as well. And really, another one of the key benefits of robotic process automation is the ability to facilitate integration, where it's otherwise not possible, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the second part of it was we tried to understand how many real estate companies are using more applications, more CRE specific applications they are today versus they were 3 years ago. And 58% of the surveyed members said that they use more applications today than they did 3 years ago. And in addition to that, almost 59% said they don't have comprehensive integrations between their core office systems because it's getting more complex, because you have more systems, and because you have different data models. Now, by automating and standardizing some of these integration capabilities through automation, we have an opportunity to address that big gap, which is the 60% of this industry, to help make sure that their data is consistent through all their CRE back office systems so that they can have better visibility into it and make better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I thought that was a great way to kind of set the scene as to what some of the leaders in the industry actually think about the technology, and also sort of to understand where we're at in terms of integrations and things like that. But so I'd like to kind of unpack with some of our panelists how they actually arrived at the decision to use robotic process automation within their organization. So Dean from REIT, you didn't really arrive at automation as the first step. You had a specific business problem, isn't that right?
Yeah. So 1 year ago, actually, this quarter, and actually 1 year ago last week, REIT held a company-wide accounting, financial planning, forecasting group meeting. And basically, it came from the fact that our executive team told the group that we had to reduce the cycle time from property budgeting to FP&A to guidance by 10 days. It was non-negotiable, we had to do it. And so we sat down in the meeting for a day and we looked at all the processes across that. We figured out where the low-hanging fruit was. We got that put out of the way. We got a couple days out of that. But one of the major areas that we were having problems with is we're a RealLogic user on the property budget side, and we're an Argus Enterprise user on the forecasting side. And so as we looked at that cycle time, there was at least 6 days of cycle time to get from RealLogic to Argus Enterprise to get the data to each. So break that down more quantitative. It took an hour and a half per property for our asset manager financial analyst group to take the information from RealLogic out, make sure everything looked right, then push it through to the Argus Enterprise solution, again then checking to make everything look right. With the automation tool and with what was done with OpenBox, we took that from 1 hour to 1.5 hours per property to 15 minutes for each of the portfolios for the asset managers. That's about 20 properties a piece. So it was a significant time. That cut us down over 5 days. So that was an amazing chunk that was taken out of that life cycle time. We've now reached the goal of taking that 10 days out as of the last quarter. So that was the automation process that we went through.
Well, that's fantastic. And so, Ilene, just speaking to kind of what you're doing at Hines, you're at kind of the beginning of your journey of RPA, aren't you, right? Why don't you give us a little bit of insight as to what you're doing and how you got there?
Well, and ours was a little bit more, not necessarily solving a current business problem, but it's one that we are trying to apply to the future. So we tend to have a lot of employee loans, and I don't know, how other firms have that. We have a lot of employee loans, and over the years, we've gotten more and more, and it's all been in Excel. Okay, so everything's tracked in Excel. We have a group that monitors it. We send it out to Accenture. They do some work kind of overseas. They send it back. We review it. We have a group then that books things to the GL, and there's a whole process related to it. And so we were tasked with how do you reduce the risk in that process? Okay, so it wasn't necessarily the time; it was the risk, because this is all manually done in Excel. And we knew that just as our business is growing, that we were going to have more of these things. And it was, well, we don't want to just keep adding heads every time, because while it's a vitally important part, of our employees' lives, they don't necessarily want to go pay for, extra bodies related to that. And so what we're doing is actually building it in JD Edwards. Okay, so we are JD Edwards shop, and so we decided to use JD Edwards functionality to do this, which you know, is not. We try to use JD Edwards as creatively as possible. So when we got to that point, we basically said, in order to do this, there is a significant time to just process some things in JD Edwards. Okay, specifically related to cash receipts was our focus. And we said, unless we figure out how to handle that, this entire new process will fail. Okay, so literally the go, no-go decision was based on how can we try to automate that process, okay? And so that's when we came to OpenBox and said, we need you all to help us and say, can we automate this one piece, which will then streamline this whole process and reduce risk across our organization in this area. So that's what we're building with OpenBox right now, and we're really, really excited about it. I mean, you're talking, our CFO was like, well, you reduce the risk, you're gonna reduce the time, we don't have to add headcount. I mean, you basically have a better product. And so that's where we are, in our journey. But as we're dipping our toe into it, then we start talking with you all and we're like, well, wait a minute. We have that same real logic to Argus problem, okay? So let's go look at that. Oh, wait a minute, we have this over here. And so, I mean, for us, it's just been eye-opening about, the avalanche is coming, right? Because we're looking at every one of these and saying, well, we can use it here and here and here.
So interestingly, you mentioned that a portion of one of the processes you were outsourcing to another vendor, and now you've actually gone to making the decision to replace that outsourcing with RPA, isn't that right? What do you see?
Yes, and hopefully there's nobody in here that from Accenture that I just spilled beans on. Sorry about that. Okay, so so basically it's you're choosing to go from an outsourced person to an outsourced system, okay? And the benefits of that are huge, right? Because one of the other problems we had, again, no offense to anybody in the audience from Accenture, was that we get data back, we review it, and it wasn't necessarily always correct. I mean, there's just human error, right? I mean, that's just what's gonna happen. So not only were we outsourcing, then we're reviewing, and then we're adjusting and all that. So if you actually have it from an automation system perspective, I mean, that reduces to zero, right? I mean, there's just rules, and that's how you're going to apply them. And so we're not only gonna get a better product, I mean, it's a more timely product, it reduces the risks and all that. So yes, it's kind of just switching your idea of outsourcing to a person to outsourcing to automation, and I mean, it's just kind of a win all around.
Absolutely. And Lauren, at RealFoundations, so you guys are actually using RPA to make your managed service delivery center more efficient, isn't that right?
Yeah, so we are the outsourced provider. So in our Chennai Service Center, in delivering accounting services, as you all know, accounting is there's a lot of manual work that's involved, and we started to kind of see that, and it was also the reduction in quality risk, right? And so we were focused really on two things: one, getting hours returned to the business and freeing up. We were looking at shift times and trying to figure out how we can free up some resources here to add capacity to do some more work over here. And we were, if you get into an overtime issue and we don't want to deal with that, so we were really having to think about how can we take some of this work that is pretty manual in nature and apply some automation to it. So we also focused on the processes that really we needed to reduce the quality risk. And so we built a few robots. We started really small, and we just knew that we had to get a win. And we saw the process. We started with basically building a robot that would go through and do PDF highlighting, essentially. And we're like, okay, well that's pretty cool. We can do that. So then, what could we apply to next? And so then our next, what we've conquered next is a reporting robot, right? So we've got a client with a pretty large, diversified portfolio and period end reporting. We have to do that at the asset level, at the portfolio level, and the reports are automated in the system, but then there's also the piece of taking all of those reports, manually putting them together, and then doing that for each and every portfolio. You're talking 30 minutes, per period, per client. It just, you extrapolate that out. It was quite a significant amount of time that someone was having to do that. And now we've got that down to a minute. It's crazy, right? So that freed up the capacity of that person. And so that's really what we've been exploring, is just trying to apply it to to those different pieces of work that where we can free up some time and reduce quality risk.
Brilliant. Chris, at Granite Properties, so you also you kind of had a specific need as well, right? It wasn't necessarily a decision to go straight or to embrace robotic process automation. There was a need that kind of drove you to using the technology, isn't that right?
Absolutely. And so one of our processes we do every year with every group is try to identify pain points, obviously within the organization, and get better. And one of the pain points that our operations group talked about was just dealing with above building standard charges and collecting them, billing them, invoicing the tenant, all, you know, that whole process. So we, again, started with a business need, and automation really fell in our lap. And so we're using automation as more of a front-end integration between our work order system and our accounting system, JD Edwards. And so what this has really allowed us to do is eliminate the need for developers to create an integration between the two systems. We all know the pros and cons of developers, but this really allows us to create that integration between the two systems without the need for technology. And so it was really as simple as handing over our training materials to insert billings into JD Edwards. We initiated in the technology group, but it really could have been initiated by accounting or property ops. There was no need for true IT work in there. So what we've done is really streamline that integration. There's lots of pros to that. Our billing cycles were different in each market. We're trying to drive consistency, efficiency, and then also take that mundane manual work out of our properties' hands and let them go on to the more value-add activities. We want them in front of our tenants and our customers and building those relationships and having higher-level conversations. So we're not stuck behind a desk just crunching numbers, taking information from one system to another. And so we've really grown that process. This was a part of a little bit larger efficiency project. And now once it's into JD Edwards, we streamline it into a tenant portal. So as soon as our folks click done in our tenant work order system, it posts to JD Edwards that night, and then the tenant gets an automated email. So we've really streamlined and eliminated all of the billing, the above billing standards billing for our property group, and given them all that time back. So it's about the time, but then it's about consistency. We're not doing it one property every quarter, one property every month, one property every week. It's all done in a very timely manner and consistent across our brand.
Brilliant. So Dhinaker, I mean, slightly different approach that's taken at Altus Group. I mean, Altus Group's they've got various different sort of business lines and service offerings, but Altus Group is actually using automation to provide a better service to their clients on the valuations and appraisal side, isn't that right?
Yes, so a key offering for Altus Group's expert services division is a valuation management piece, and we have quite a few clients that and part of that particular process, we help our clients with quarterly valuations of their assets. And anybody who's gone through a valuation process for an asset understands what a manual process it is and where all the different places that data sits, right? So the first part of generating that valuation is trying to collect data from, for each quarter, we'd have to collect what happened with the previous quarter. We have to get the asset models from appraisers. We have to get information like tenancy schedules and things like that from property management, and pull all of that information into a single place, leverage or extract relevant key components from there to build our new model, and then compare what's the difference between the previous valuation to the current valuation and identify it. That process for our clients typically took 4 weeks, right? And we had to hire a lot of resources to manually extract this information and put that in together, right? And this is not just a full-time job, but it could spike up, especially during the quarterly process, where we would then hire temps or interns to help through this process. And that introduced an additional quality risk evaluation piece, right? So, at Altus Group, we're always looking at innovative ways to try to help add more value to our clients. So this was, obviously I can take credit for this, but it was someone at the expert services who had identified that making this an automated process would definitely not only reduce the cycle time of putting all this data in for a valuation model from 4 weeks to almost 36 hours, right? And it would also give our valuation personnel more time to get the comprehensive data, the updated data, to help understand the changes and to help build out the correct reasons and auditability of those changes, right? And as that's the value add that we've provided to our clients by reducing the overhead of having an automated valuation, or through this valuation process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's key. It's ultimately your professionals that you're giving them that time to focus on what they're actually good at and what they should be focusing on, as opposed to just going through a manual process and updating data to get to the point where they can actually affect evaluation, right?
Right. And I think, I don't have a yardstick to measure, but I think definitely morale's improved, right, as we introduce this process, because they're not focusing on things they have to do, they're focusing on things they want to do. And they have a sense of purpose that's added, an additional sense of purpose that's added to that business process and that outcome that we're delivering. So.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about how you actually are interacting with the robots in your environment. So Dee, I mean, in your case, and I get asked this a lot, I mean, what does a robotic process automation solution look like in your environment? I mean, how are your users interacting with the robot? I mean, are you logging in somewhere, or how does that actually look, if you don't mind unpacking?
Yeah, no problem. So from our standpoint and our automation, basically there are a set of 3 key elements. There's the property list, there's the timing of that property that property budgeting period, and also the scenario and all the they're going against. So with those 3 pieces of information, literally, an email is sent to the robot. The information of those 3 files is sent to the robot, and with that information, it logs in to Reallogic. It pulls down the report. It scans the report for any anomalies before it would be processed over to Argus Enterprise. Those anomalies are set through a set of rules that we are now consistently reviewing before we pass that information over to Argus Enterprise. So our FP&A guys are coming back and saying this is all wrong. And so that ability to do just that checkpoint alone before it gets over in the FP&A group, talk about having happy people, they are able to then on the property management, asset management side, correct those issues, rerun the process, again, very efficiently within 15 to 20 minutes, push that back through, and then when the information is taken over to Argus Enterprise, FP&A is informed that that is now available for them to start reviewing and doing their process. So as before, with all of that automation, that was all communication through hundreds of emails, word of mouth. People on vacation didn't get informed about something. This is all now completely automated in a process of a set of 3 to 4 emails that go between those groups. So that's how we communicate, literally through just an email interaction submitted to the bot.
Okay, so that's more of a triggered approach, but so Chris, it's slightly different in your organization, right? It kind of happens in the background, isn't that right?
It is. There's absolutely no communication with our robot. Our process is kicked off. It sounds so weird to still say, right? But our process is kicked off by just an automated report from our work order system. It drops a file on an FTP site, and then every night this robot is going to check for activity and then just automatically doing its work, and then again it's flowing through to our tenant portal, so our customers are seeing it immediately. I'd love to say that was day one. It wasn't. It was a process to get there, because when you start talking to operations and accounting about saying there's no more need to review batches or post batches in JD Edwards, there's a little bit of skepticism, right? I mean, and just uncertainty. We're taking away power and control of those property accountants of reviewing stuff and posting it. So we did go through an exercise and just the change management of, okay, well, we're going to put stuff into JD Edwards and not post it immediately. We'll still give you that interim review capability and post capability, but knowing that it's all a matter of comfort. Let's get them comfortable and then continue to automate and push those boundaries as much as we can to eliminate the human interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the adoption factor, because that's very key within sort of embracing this new technology. You have to get everyone within your organization on board that to the point where they actually realize that automation is going to be a less risky approach to the way you're doing that today, right?
Absolutely, and we're we kind of pride ourselves, we would probably say one of our secret sauces is relationships inside the company and outside the company. And so taking away processes from people was a little nervous because some of the people, you know, when you hear automation, I think some people immediately think job reduction. We're trying to reduce staff, and that's not our approach at all. Our approach is when we want to double our company's square footage in the next 5 years, we don't want to double our employee count. We want to increase our employee count by 30% or 40%, not by 100%. And that's really the goal of automation. So our journey has really been an organic journey. We started it really behind the scenes, weren't talking about automation a whole lot, and now the questions are being asked, how are we doing this? Our people love it. You know, what's going on? And we tell the automation story, and that leads to well, that's awesome. What else can we do? You know, now and so, yeah, like I said, our journey was trying to be organic, not pushing this on people, letting the story tell itself. It kind of showing the win rather than talking about the win. And if you build it, they will come mentality. They're coming. They're saying, what else can we do? We want more automation. We love it. We want to get our people in front of our customers. What else can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. And Lauren, from a RealFoundations perspective, just in terms of driving adoption, I mean, your approach was slightly different as well, right?
Well, yeah, we thought, well, there's two ways to approach this, right? We could spend a ton of time really thinking through end-to-end all of our processes and going through and trying to put an ROI next to every single one, and then picking the one. It's almost analysis paralysis. You can really get caught up in that. And so we just knew that we had to, very, very similar to what Chris was saying, we had to get a win. We had to do something, and we had to show value. And we knew that if we could do that we, it starts small. We didn't have to go big. We knew that we could get the buy-in. And so that's the exact same approach that we did, is starting off not really with an fully autonomous robot, but more of the trigger-based, where someone is actually, you know, executing the robot, and then the robot is going behind the scenes and doing the work. So that was our approach. It's worked well, and now we're trying to think about, now how do we go and automate between applications, right, and take it to a grander scale. But yeah, that's exactly how we started.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about approval in terms of getting things signed off in your organization? I mean, I feel like you're fortunate enough to operate within a business time where you get a bit of license to try things out, isn't that right?
Right. So I'm in a little bit of a hybrid role, or slightly different role. So my group started at Hines about 3 years ago. It was a newly formed group, and the purpose of this group, as I was told, was to wake up every day thinking about how to do things better. I mean, that was literally my job description. And it's from the business side, not necessarily from the technology side, right? And so I came up through the organization, as Dustin mentioned, in accounting, investment management. I worked at a fund, I worked at a property. So I had a lot of this experience that I kind of brought to the table, and they said, we want you to just start thinking about how to do things better. And I technically report up to our IT steering committee. And so with that license, it gives us a lot of ability to try things, okay, and to do things with the organization that we wouldn't necessarily have done before, because you really have to go and, you know, into part of the organization and really kind of say, we want to try this, and these people are taking up all this time away from their day jobs and all that. So we kind of, I worked with a few people, you know, from the IT group and from the IT steering committee and all that. We kind of just stood back and said, we need to go, we need to try it. And so we decided to try it within this one area, the employee loan area, as well as kind of focused on 4 different areas of the organization. So our East region, to do something in Europe, and to do something in the IT group. And so that's really where it started, and we're just doing it. I mean, honestly. So we didn't really have a big approval chain. We didn't have, you know, anything like that, because we have the license to go and do some things and try it, you know, and succeed and or, you know, fail, and then kind of bring it to the organization. But I will say it's an interesting topic. So we discuss a lot of things we're doing with the organization at various times, and you know, I was speaking with our investment management group, and I said, we're going to try, you know, some robotic process automation. which point they all gasp, and I say, I'm not taking your accountants away from you. Okay, because that's all what they think, right, is that we're gonna go do that. And so it's just about education, and the minute that they really realize what it is that means their accountants are going to be more on hand to answer questions, or the property managers don't have to be checking all the, billings and things like that. I mean, the minute they figure that out, I mean, they are all on board. I mean, this is truly freeing up your folks to do value-add work, okay? And there's been no one, I mean, from a staff accountant, all the way through our investment management ranks, that, thinks, the minute you talk about it, they don't think it's job reduction. They just clearly see the benefits to the organization. And so we've had, I would say pretty much zero pushback related to it, because they clearly see what's gonna happen.
Absolutely. And Dean, from your perspective, I mean, you had a specific point solution that you were looking to solve. How to drive adoption, in terms of approval within an organization?
The CFO said reduce cycle time by 10 days. There wasn't much any clearer than that. So the good thing about, and the great thing about our organization is that we actually have a young sub-executive team, and that team really is interested in technologies. And so when I came aboard, one of the things that the CEO looked at me and says, I know you've been in other places where technology at times was looked upon as this cost center. He says, it's still a cost center, get that? But at the end of the day, we want to be at a place where we are making things more efficient through technology. So when we had the opportunity to look at this full process in that year ago session, it was very obvious to us that this was just one area that we were either going to have to build some mega integration and try to work with the Altus group, and the guys are doing a great job of starting to proceed to get more integration with that solution, but we didn't have that time. So we had to look at something, and 1 year ago at the conference out in San Diego, I met with you, and I noticed that there was a bot thing, what's going on here, how does this work? And so I went back to the team at that point and said, I figured out what we're gonna do, this is how we're gonna do it, and they adopted and said, go try it, see what happens. And so they actually implemented 3 people, one out of our property management group, one out of our financial planning group, and one out of our analytic asset management group, and said, you guys are the team, figure it out. And so within 3 months, we had the process fully running the last 3 quarters, and one of the things that we absolutely have seen is that the reduction in errors, the days compressed, and the absolute communication and cooperation within all 3 groups has significantly increased from the standpoint of cooperation and decreased from errors. And we actually were having our final meetings last week before our quarter ends, and they're just like, this is the smoothest process we've been through in 18 months. So it's working.
Fantastic. What about the challenges? I mean, so Chris, just in terms of your organization, I think we spoke before about having to, or some of the challenges, some of it being a positive, some of it being a negative, in terms of having to have your process, excuse me, having to have your process mapped out already in order to adopt this.
Sure, yeah, I mean, it's just like anything automated. If it's garbage in, it's gonna be garbage out. You have to know your processes, and again, it's gotta be very, very consistent. From what we've seen, this robot can't, it's not doing any thinking, so if you're not putting something in the same place every single time, it's not gonna go hunt and look for it through an email or another folder. So it's really driving clear and concise processes. You have to know exactly what you're doing and everything around it, or it's not gonna work. So that's kind of a negative, but you can always spin it as a positive to say, this is an opportunity to learn your processes better and clearly define those processes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost by embracing RPA within your organization, it's forcing you to have a look at your processes and maybe improve them in many ways, right?
Absolutely. Again, just the example I used earlier was we literally had people doing billings once a day, in some markets once a week, once a month, and quarterly. And so that just gets into, I don't remember what happened 2 weeks ago. How do we want to talk about a bill that happened 3 months ago, whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent from their perspective. So let's get it done quicker. So let's just say this is the process. You don't have to do anything different. You close it and it's done. There's no more going back to a secondary system and redoing the same work that you've already done in the first system.
Yeah, let me just add. So at Hines, we tend to think the word consistency or standardization is like a four-letter word. Okay, I mean, they just hate using that word. Okay, but what they're seeing though is the benefits of the bot outweigh the negatives of consistency and standardization, right? And so, we've been working with you all, and the process Reallogic to AE process had just organically come from, well, this property did this way, and this property did this way, and this property, just because they didn't know any better, right? And everybody was just doing it themselves. And when we worked with you all, we said, well, what if we do this? And they were like, okay, because what they saw was, well, if I do that, then all of a sudden, and it takes, 3 minutes instead of 3 hours for a big campus and putting things in, well, of course, why wouldn't I? So it's so funny because it's just organically happening that the consistency will be there, even though if you had said that a year ago, you need to all do this consistently in the same way, I mean, they would have flipped out on you, right? We don't do it that way, we're entrepreneurial, things like that, so.
Absolutely. So what about data security and governance? Lauren, do you have any insights in that regard?
It's less about data governance and it's more about the identity management and governance of the actual robot. Because that robot has credentials, has an identity, it's logging in and it's performing activities in applications, and those activities have to be logged, they have to be tracked, and the exceptions that kick out and how the human interacts with that robot, all of that needs to be tracked, right? And you need to have visibility into that. And just like any other identity, you've got to make sure that you've got the right security. There's password protection and all of that applies. So it's those are considerations that you have to keep in mind, and those are things that you have to manage if you're building that capability internally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. On our side, really, we've now started rolling out some of the accounting side, and that's really a critical piece, is that our auditors are in the review process on anything we're doing with the bot now on the accounting side. Not so much when we decided to do from the Reallogic side, it's not really an auditable system, but the accounting folks, every step of the way they're reviewing it. We're actually, in some cases, putting new narratives and new processes, steps together on the accounting side that have to be done for the review. So we definitely are doing that.
And speaking to the benefits, and Dean, you mentioned the benefits that you're getting just from an efficiency perspective, just time to do this and how that's improved. But speaking about the auditing side, what you kind of have now is you have every single step in your process is being tracked and
for some of the process, it's a single user ID. We know who did it.
Yeah.
We knew that nobody else should be in there doing it, and so it's kind of that. Why did we actually had a situation where we were doing some recurring journal entries, and there was a person who just decided that for that quarter they were going to do theirs. It's like, no, you do it through the bot. That's what we trained you to do. So retraining program, but there was an adoption issue there, but that's just part of the process. You have to just keep continuing. If next quarter they won't be around anymore. So they do it again.
That's the same, so valuation management, right, requires a lot of regulatory compliance, so we do a lot of self-auditing at Altus Group, and we also have to get third-party audits to that service. So if we go through a SOC 1 compliance or a SOC 1 type 1 audit or a SOC 1 type 2 audit, and part of those audits require these third-party auditors to come and take a look at our processes and to understand and select specific examples of some random projects that we did and identify if we're following what the processes that we documented as we go through the evaluation system. When you're doing it through humans and a manual process, you have a tendency to deviate in certain situations from that. So that becomes difficult from an auditability perspective. But when you do this through an automated process, the results are always the same because you've developed a robot based on the documentation that you've put together. So when you're picking any random example when the auditor comes in, it's going to be consistent. The audit cycle becomes faster and everybody has more peace of mind, right? So I think that's a big value add of introducing automation through the valuation management process at Altus Group for us as well. So.
Absolutely. And just in terms of your journey at Altus Group, so you've done one automation for a particular client.
Right.
Where do you go from here? What's
So if I ask what Calvode, he'll say more, we want more. I think there's a two-part answer to that question, right? So the first part, yes, now it's about showing the value that we've delivered to this one client to all our other clients, and say that automation or introducing robotic automation to this process that we have with you is going to add value to you, and just expanding that and making it our standard practice in valuation management. And once we do that, like Lauren said, let's go and find out all the different things that we have to do, that we can do, and introduce that and reduce cycle times. That'll be the next broader step. The second part to it, right? So when you think about automation, there's two different things. There's about reducing the repetitive tasks and the manual tasks that people do. And then there is the real-time access to information and making sure that real-time access is automatically available to people, right? That second part is really one of the big drivers of the cloud strategy that we're implementing at Altus Group for our Argus solutions, right? So by introducing APIs that for say Argus solutions, or by leveraging APIs for other core systems like ERD or your cloud-first apps like Honest Buildings and VTS, you can then build out automation processes that would automatically populate that information, right? And that would not only reduce the cycle time, it would also improve better visibility, right? So, like if I go back to the example of valuation management, instead of getting a model from the appraiser's Argus Enterprise system, somebody emails it to me, then I upload it into my Argus Enterprise system, extract the information and put that in. If I had APIs and I could build an automated robot that would just send all of that information on a scheduled process, right? And it's all bringing in the Argus model data, it's bringing in tenancy schedule data through APIs. I think that is the next evolution, at least for robotic automation in the CRE industry. And I think having core systems enable that automation and real-time integrations are definitely going to help.
Well, I mean, that's key, is everybody wants the real-time data, but they want it now, right? I mean, all the investors, everybody, you're reducing by 10 days, everybody wants it faster, right? And so the question is, how do you get it faster, right? And the faster is either you're throwing bodies at it, right? Or you're trying to figure out how to do it more efficiently. And the RPAs are just solving that, right? And you don't, and by the way, it's also better quality. I mean, because you do have human error. I mean, it's not that no one wants to do a bad job. They have human error. So all of a sudden you have this access to information, just faster, better, reduced risk. I mean, it kind of, again, the minute you roll it out and show people, I mean, I've got a list, a mile long sitting next to my computer about where we want to go next, right? I mean, it's just kind of, it's amazing.
You almost have to say, pump the brakes a little
Right,
bit.
right, yes. Because again, it's the change management piece, right? Not because you can't go that fast on the robot, right? It's change management.
Absolutely.
Okay, that means I need to redeploy you from doing this to this over here, and things like that. And that just takes time, and energy. So.
Yeah, who wants to do data entry?
Right.
It's just, it's not fun. It's not.
Well, and as you're competing for talent, right? As you're competing for talent, are you going to say, hey, I need you to spend all this time doing all this data entry over here, blah, 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 or I need you to spend time doing something that's more value added, right? I mean, they're going to take that job over the data entry all day long. So as we're all competing for it, that and the talent pool, is shrinking, and you're trying to give them better work environments. I mean, this is what you need to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, you mentioned you guys are looking to scale, and really that speaks to that talent pool that you're looking for, right? If you're looking to scale, but you're able to embed robotic process automation within your environment, that changes what you're looking for out there in the talent pool, right?
Absolutely. And so I think we've all talked about it this week, just the kind of the culture is shifting. We are looking for new, different talent. And so like you're saying, if we can look for talent that is more customer focused rather than data entry driven, it's a totally different type of person that we're looking for. And so the same person we'd hired 10 years ago, we may not hire again this year because it's a totally different job role. It's a customer service role more than a back office property operations role.
Or I would say it differently. Like we have our property managers that we're spending a lot of time walking the building, all that, and over the past 5, 10 years, they had to spend more time on the data entry, okay? And they had to do more of this stuff. And you had all of them saying, wait, that wasn't what I wanted to do as my job, right? I mean, they wanted to be walking the building and spending the time with the tenants. And basically they're spending more and more time behind their desk because, wait, you need to do reporting, and you need to go do your billings, you need to do all this.
It's the keep the lights on activities that we all have to make money to continue doing it, but we want to improve the experience that our customers are having rather than spend time billing them and working on collections and things like that.
And that's what we're hearing from our property management staff is if you can give us that time back to walk the building, because that's really what we want to do. I mean, from a property management side, you know how many property managers have told me, I didn't go to school to be an accountant, but you're making me do reporting. Okay, you're right. So now, if we can change that narrative, then they're back. They're really happy. I mean, going back to what they wanted to be doing in the first place.
So one of the things our property group is actually going through right now is a disciplined time tracking activity to really prove to themselves where are we spending all of our time. And just going right to your point, if we're spending 40% of our day in my office, on the computer, punching numbers, that's not valuable time that I'm spending with our customers. And so I think out of that activity is going to drive really to get that data of, we don't think we're spending 30% of our time, we know that we're spending 37% of our time on this activity that we want to focus on automating and making more efficient.
That was that year ago session that pointed out, and Lauren was actually there, that pointed out how much accounting our property management team was doing. Our CFO was, eyes were like this. Mortified. How did this happen?
Right.
And it's like, well, you've asked them to get the numbers, and so it was very eye-opening, and it helped. As you talk about adoption, this helped that adoption. I mean, it was we have to get them back to dealing with our tenants. This is silly.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, so everyone's kind of spoken to the benefits and within their own organization, within their own processes. But what about at a high level? And I'd like to get everyone's thoughts on this. I mean, how big do you think an impact robotic process automation can actually have on the real estate industry? So, Dhinaker, your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think obviously real estate industry is lagging behind in terms of compared to some of the other industries out there about robotic process automation. Going back to the report, we've identified 6 or 7 key areas, right, where we think can be completely automated, or where CRE professionals think can be completely automated. And that, I think, just goes on to show that in the real estate space, and particularly in back office systems, there's still a lot of manual processes, there's still a lot of back and forth, and still a lot of data fragmentation across the systems. I think there's significant amount of potential here, right? I think for me, this might be an unpopular opinion with some of my valuation colleagues, but automated valuation modeling, right, could be automated. Especially if you have access to the data, if you've got APIs that can get you all the comps and all the information. There's just endless, but those are two or three things that stick out to me at least.
Absolutely. I mean, this is first step in the journey, prove out a pilot, make sure that it works within your organization, but how big can you take this?
Oh, I mean, we think it's huge. I mean, it's just, there is, if you kind of look at Hines and you have all these different business lines, right? I mean, we have, property management, we have investment management, we have, everything, kind of every property type. We have, all over the world. I mean, I can just go through every single area and say, and there, and there, and there, and there. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. And it goes back to, all of our owners, everyone is asking for better information faster, right? And so from a delivery perspective, I mean, we just think that this is going to really change a lot of that for us. And again, get our folks out of the weeds. I mean, and I think, we talk a lot about it, and I think most people do, but people being your biggest asset, okay? Our folks have been buried under paperwork, right? I mean, just buried. And it's because of the new tools and moving data around, it's because of reporting requirements, it's because of compliance. I mean, like everything in the industry has kind of been amped up, I would say, really ever since the recession and things like that, and people are buried, whether it's our engineers or our property managers or our accountants or our fund managers. I mean, so I think that if you can alleviate that from them, it's really, really welcome.
Absolutely.
Well, not to to be a Dean Downer, but I mean, there's a cycle coming. We've been in such a high for so long. There's a cycle coming, and we're really focusing on how this automation can keep us from having to do, you know, downsizing, and we're really looking at, from a standpoint of growth too, how do we keep us from having to grow 30, 40, 50% of the people. So we really are focusing now on how this bot operation, our president, who was the CFO, is now our president COO, we had a meeting last week, and he's like, we got to go through these processes and figure out during the down cycle, because it's coming, how do we make sure that we have these automations in place? And that's not just accounting, that's in our property management organization, our building management systems. What are we doing to support our people so they truly are focusing on what their jobs truly are? Analyzing information, making things better, rather than paperwork.
Agreed, and so I think the sky is the limit with automation is kind of how I think about it, and not just in fully automated processes. You know, we were talking about fully automated valuations. To me, that seems like a stretch. That is an amazing goal to get to, but if we can get to 90% automated valuations, I think that's very real in the short term. Because our guys are still going to want to do some analysis of it, but if we can do all the prep work automatically to get them there and save all that time, to me, it's a lot of the, you know, kind of the staging of data, the automated staging of data to make decisions day one, not day 10 of a project. Agreed with Dean about, you know, we know a downturn is coming, and within our company, I think honestly that's where the automation is going to ramp up, because we always talk about using the downturn as kind of get our house in order and get ready to sprint for the next cycle. So using that downturn to automate. So in the next sprinting cycle, we're making decisions, and our speed to execution is half of what it was in the last cycle.
Game changer. It is. If you look at an entry-level bookkeeper, RPA can pretty much do all of that today. And so you really think about all of the work that's done in the back office, and just if you kind of fast forward 10 years from now and you try to visualize what that's going to look like, I really truly think that we're going to have more robots and fewer people doing that work. Which you think about, well then, according to the talent, then where did those people go? What do they do? And sometimes that's a scary discussion to have, and people think, you know, the tagline that robots are going to be better than humans at everything by 2030. I mean, that kind of freaks you out a little bit. But I do think it's a game changer. I think it's going to really revolutionize our industry, and specifically the back office within the next, 5 to 10 years.
Excellent. Well, I mean, some amazing thoughts from all the panelists. That we do have 1 or 2 minutes left, and I was hoping to just open it up to a few questions. So here we go.
So if I was to name a few business groups like HR, investments, development, operations, finance, leasing, IT, marketing, what would be the top 2 you should approach or give this bang for buck?
For me, it's accounting and property operations. I mean, accounting is it's the same process over and over on a monthly or quarterly or annual basis. So to me, that's starting to be a no-brainer. And then just other automated or kind of routine
Lease
Monday.
administration. I mean, lease
Yeah,
administration.
lease administration
is
is
a huge area, and that's what we're getting all of our ducks in a row about, where we're to start, using kind of lease administration. I'd rather have all of our folks spending time actually understanding and analyzing the lease, not necessarily going and figuring out how to go, key it or do whatever.
Totally
to
agree.
get it to
Yeah, our 2019 number 1 is leasing,
Yeah.
and right now we've already done the FP&A to explain the accounting. That leasing is number 1 for next year.
When each of you were talking about adoption, it seemed like one of your objectives is to continue to create better, more meaningful jobs. Make sense? So, do you have any early data on what's that meaning from an employee engagement perspective or from an employee turnover perspective?
Employee turnover perspective, when we're getting the new younger hires, we're seeing more excitement in that they are actually doing the analytical job, and and I'm talking FP&A, our financial experience, so our asset management group have financial analysts, and our FP&A group are doing the numbers for the public accounting. Those groups, average age right now are 27. They are now doing their jobs of actually analyzing the data rather than doing data input. We're seeing longer term stay. When I got there 3 years ago, we had the turnover in those two groups of probably 2-3 people a year. And now in the last 18 months, as we've started to look at the new process and everything we've done, we're starting to see people be more happy, they're at work, they're actually heads down, and we're getting better results on that side.
And I'd say from us, from the employee loan perspective, so our, the woman that we have that runs that group, and she will fully admit she is change adverse, okay? And especially related to technology, I mean, she all in on this. And she could not be more excited. I mean, and she has totally drank the Kool-Aid, bought in, said, well, where else can we start applying it in this process? I mean, she just thinks this is going to, revolutionize, her entire group and what they do and things like that. So, so while we don't have, concrete, I do know that for somebody that's really not a technologist, she's all in.
Can you give a real life example where someone got retrained and automated a job? How did they go back and do what kind of work they do after automation?
Well, as I said, our FP&A group, our asset managers were actually doing the extraction of the information from ROBOTIC, running that whole process. So you're talking of very high salary level people, along with a second, a very high salary level, their financial analysts doing all that work. So while it didn't, as far as change the job of what they were supposed to be doing, they're now doing the job they were supposed to be doing, rather than being a data extraction person, spending an hour and a half making sure everything was right and putting it through, or pushing that off to the financial analyst. The financial analyst going, I'm supposed to be doing these other. It really is giving them back that time. And as I said, we are seeing the value in the specifics of numbers that are just coming out so much better. Thought around the numbers. Why has there been a change? We're just seeing that in the last 2 quarters. We've absolutely seen that. To our new CFO and our COO president, they're like, this is night and day difference of what we were seeing out of those groups.
And I have to say, for ours, for the employee loans, and again, we're starting this journey. I mean, you're talking about people at our organization that are very, very demanding, want answers fast, want all this kind of stuff about some of their, employee information. So you had a group of people that were working constantly. I mean, you're talking about, you're on call all the time, regional CEOs calling, whatever. But they were working constantly because not only are they doing that, they're trying to, check all this data, check all this data. So we see and we know what's coming is that all of a sudden, their true work-life balance is going to change, okay? They are not going to be 24/7 pulling their hair out, because it's honestly going to alleviate a burden so they can actually spend that time talking to those folks.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I really encourage you, if you have any further questions, to come up and chat to our panelists, or come and chat to us in the exhibitor hall. Firstly, just like to thank all of you for coming. There's really a lot on the go and a great number of tracks, so thank you very much for choosing this one, and to our panelists, just for some really incredibly insightful